welcome back to my channel. My name is Sonya. I'm a clinical psychology doctorate student, and I like to make videos that are real-life applications to psychology, relationships, education, etc. So today I want to talk about attachment theory because it is something I'm very passionate about in terms of understanding myself, understanding other people and how they go through relationships. It's just really important for individuals. Even if you're not someone who studies psychology, you should probably know what your attachment is because it's going to help you understand the way you connect with others and why that might be. Attachment theory was invented by Boody, and it's really important for us to know in terms of health, happiness, interpersonal relationships. You should find out who you are before finding what you want, aka dating. It's not only just important for psychological well-being. Obviously, finding someone who's compatible with you and understanding yourself is good for psychological well-being, right? But studies actually show that individuals who don't feel love in their life are more at risk for physiological concerns, and they might have similar health issues to somebody who smokes cigarettes, for example. So clearly, relationships matter so much for your physical and psychological well-being. As a society, we need to improve the way we go about relationships because there are more singles now more than ever. And part of that might be due to the fact that it was a lot more engraved in society back in the day to get married early, and it was a little bit more of a focus on heterosexual couples, a woman finding a man that provides for her and she takes care of the house. Luckily, I'm so glad that I was born in this generation, even though it isn't completely equal and there's still issues of inequality among genders. It has gotten better in terms of women being able to be independent and live independent lives and take care of themselves rather than just living to find a man, because I know that's not my life purpose, is to be with somebody, and I'm happily single. If I was born 60 years ago, I don't think I would be able to have a lot of the freedoms that I have now to express myself and also obviously have this kind of career path. As a society, improvements can be made when it comes to relationships. So before I get into what attachment theory is and the different types of attachment styles, I've put a couple links below for you to take an attachment style quiz to find out what your attachment style is. And one of them actually found from a Shan Boody video. And she has this attachment style quiz that is Game of Thrones themed. So you find out pretty much which characters she pretty much decides are under certain attachment styles. She pretty much analyzes them, and it's a pretty interesting video. You should watch her video. I put a link below as well for her video on attachment style and Game of Thrones characters. And if you want to know what my attachment style is based on the Game of Thrones survey, then definitely watch until the end of the video and I'll tell you. And if you take this quiz, please comment below what your results are. Which Game of Thrones character are you in relationships? If I had to summarize in one sentence what attachment theory highlights, is that the relationship that we had with our caregivers and parents has a huge impact on the relationships we have with others and with ourselves. And I'm not talking about the relationships that we have with our top 8 on MySpace. This isn't the relationships of people we have with random friends on Facebook. I'm talking about those real relationships that have an impact on the happiness in your life. Most of the population is securely attached, and I'll get into what that means in a moment. But 45% of the population is not securely attached. A lot of it has to do with their parents, the way they were raised. Were your parents cold and rejecting? Were they supportive? Were they consistent? Were they inconsistent? Were they reliable as in terms of meeting your needs? Were they overbearing, or did they give you certain freedoms? Not only does our attachment style have to do with our parents, but it also has to do with genetic predispositions, which I don't have a lot of knowledge about, so I'm going to talk more about the way that your parents and your upbringing has had an impact on your attachment style. And if you are interested in how genes have to do with it, I have put a TED Talk below that kind of dives deep into that realm. The attachment styles that I'm going to cover today are secure, anxious, and avoidant. Let's start with secure. So when you're securely attached, generally you are able to form relationships that are built on independence, trust, and healthy boundaries. Typically, if an individual has a secure attachment style, they had their needs met by their parents when they were young. They generally were able to learn how to have high emotional intelligence, maybe by modeling that of their parents. They're generally comfortable communicating, like they'll tell you what's on their mind in a healthy way, and they don't have so much of a fear of being abandoned and being left by their partners. A lot of the time, when you have a relationship with, like, let's say there's a securely attached individual who is dating another securely attached individual, they generally tend to have a long-lasting relationship. I would argue that an individual who's secure, who ends up dating somebody who's anxious or avoidant, maybe it wouldn't be such a long relationship. But comment below what you think. I'll be getting into the other attachment styles in a moment, so it might help you make that conclusion after learning more about each attachment style. So if you are securely attached, you generally don't have any issues displaying love and affection. You are comfortable being alone in times when it's appropriate and being independent. You are able to accept rejection a lot more easier than other people, and you tend to be loyal and sacrifice when necessary. Now let's get into anxious attachment style. About 20% of the population are anxiously attached. These are individuals that have love and care that is unpredictable. They might get nervous and stressed out about being left. They might have trust issues with their partner, struggle letting go. They kind of feel like this need to be with somebody that can be very unhealthy and can end up attracting not so healthy relationships. Like they might end up putting up with things that are definitely red flags. It's likely that they grew up with unhealthy boundaries. They might have had parents that were anxiously attached. A child who experiences an anxious attachment with their caregivers, they feel emotionally drained rather than nurtured by their parents because their attention just wasn't fully there. They feel like there was something missing, something empty. Maybe their parents were inconsistent in some ways. When you see a child that has an anxious attachment style, maybe it's because their parent weren't providing for their needs and giving them enough attention. They tend to cling to them. For example, they might have a hard time, like when they get dropped off to school, like leaving their parents because they feel like, oh my God, like I can't. I need you, this need for love. And they might have this fear that they aren't loved by their parents. And having this fear because their needs weren't fully met by their parents, that actually impacts their relationships through the rest of their lives unless treated. It is treatable, and I'll get into that later. But individuals, once they get into romantic relationships, they might feel like their partner doesn't love them, and they have a hard time staying in relationships because they just feel like it's almost like I can't be loved. No one can actually love me, but I need that love. And they want to be close to their partner in a way that might be a little bit unhealthy in terms of boundaries, and that might scare people away. They might be aggressive, and they might self-sabotage in a lot of ways. Someone with an anxious attachment style who dates another person might be clingy and obsessive. They might be nervous and stressed out about relationships. They need constant reassurance from their partner that they love them, that they want them. And they often will find themselves in abusive and unhealthy relationships, like I said before, because they ignore red flags and they have this need for love so much that they'll kind of just take what they can get rather than actually setting up boundaries like, okay, this is not the way that I deserve to be treated. Might say stuff like, oh, like if it's a woman, they might say like, oh, men ain't shit. They might see the opposite sex as cold and heartless and kind of talk about that a lot. And my perspective on like when people say men ain't shit or woman this or whatever, I just hate generalizations. I think that, of course, there are some people in the world that do shitty things to each other, but to take that and apply it to a gender because you've been hurt, that to me is not a good way to summarize the situation, and it can start stereotypes and problems about genders which just aren't true. Like, people ain't shit sometimes, not men ain't shit. But anyways, that's a topic for another video. Anxious people, they tend to go for partners that might hurt them. So if that sounds like something you do, or if you take that survey, whether it's the Game of Thrones one or the other one, and you find out you're anxiously attached, just keep that in mind, because these are things that you can change once you are aware of them. So let's talk about avoidant attachment style. So individuals with avoidant, they are super independent in the way that they present themselves. They are uncomfortable with intimacy. They don't really like to get too close. They worry that they may get more intimacy than they can actually handle. And they see romantic relationships kind of as this like distraction to their life goals. Like there are things in life that are more important than relationships, and if I get too close to somebody, that might distract me from what I actually want to do and focus on in my life. And they tend to push people away because of that.
Well, if we aren't all thinking the same name right now, Aya Stark. Aya Stark is the perfect example of an avoidant attachment type. Now, her goal tended to be the murder of others, and she saw intimate relationships as a distraction to her achieving that.
Because this child did not get their needs met by their caregiver, what they end up doing is they disregard their own needs for like love and affection as a way to cope with the fact that they weren't getting it. So they want to maintain peace in themselves by like accepting that that's not something they deserve, if that makes sense. And so when a parent or caregiver is emotionally unavailable or unresponsive most of the time, they just learn that intimacy isn't something I need in my life, and there's other things that are more important. It's pretty much like they adapt to rejection. Like they get rejected by their parents and then they adapt to that, and then they don't really feel like they need intimacy from other people in their life once they get older. They pretty much stop seeking closeness and they feel like there's no need to really express your emotions because that's what they've learned. If you have an avoidant attachment style, you do everything you can to avoid intimacy and being vulnerable with partners. Like for example, if somebody has an avoidant attachment style and they get dumped by a partner, they will generally pretend that they don't care.
I care about my personal space. Whoa, whoa.
A lot of the time, they will get nervous when someone gets too close, and they will emotionally withdraw. Like when things get emotional, it's like, okay, this is too much for me. There's also a combination. There are individuals with anxious avoidant attachment. A lot of the time this happens when there's been like a very abusive childhood or trauma. It turns into avoidant dismissive in adulthood. So these people are afraid of intimacy. They might lash out emotionally to those that want to get close to them, and they spend most of their time alone and miserable. There's also fearful avoidant individuals, and these people, they generally push others away because they crave a level of intimacy that they don't feel like anyone can provide for them. And so this is also common among victims of abuse. A fearful avoidant attachment style occurs in about 7% of the population, and it typically develops in the first 18 months of an individual's life. They may have viewed their parent as scary. They might have had like aggressive parents that they were scared of, and it turns into disorganized attachment when an adult. They feel unworthy of love and affection. They feel like they're going to be rejected or hurt by others. They have this like inner conflict of like wanting intimacy but then resisting it. And like people that have been abused are more likely to get into abusive relationships in the future because of this like need of intimacy. Like sometimes you can like learn enough about yourself to get over these things, but dating somebody who's securely attached, who has really healthy communication skills, might actually help someone overcome this as well. So can it be changed? Can you change your attachment style? The answer is yes. It takes time. Research shows that an anxious or avoidant individual who enters a long-term relationship with a secure individual can be raised up to the level of the secure over time, but you have to keep in mind that an anxious or avoidant individual can also bring down a securely attached individual to their level of insecurity if not careful. So this is why it's really important for all of us to know about this, because let's say we're securely attached and we start dating somebody who has an anxious attachment style or avoidant, we might start questioning ourselves and almost kind of get brought down. Because when you spend a lot of time with somebody, you might pick up their bad habits by accident, and it could be so subconscious. So we need to be aware of these things and understand that it's not your fault that they act like that. A lot of the time people lash out because of these unresolved issues that are pretty much from childhood. Knowledge is power, especially with relationships. Like I said, once you learn about your attachment style, you can learn to be different. You can teach other people how to be different. Like if you know somebody who definitely would benefit from knowing this about themselves, definitely share this video with them. We can warn ourselves and others of the traps we can fall into. Almost half of us are not secure, so this really is important for us to understand. And this is research-based information. There's been so many studies on this, and it's a big part of my therapy when I conceptualize individuals, I think of attachment style. I think about what kind of relationship did you have with your parents that's making you feel like these insecurities about yourself and feeling this need to be with somebody. So it gets really deep. I would argue that individuals with anxious attachment styles, they might be more vulnerable to catching feelings for people that give them inconsistent attention. And I've discussed that before. Nothing creates an addiction like an inconsistent reward. Individuals get addicted to people that aren't giving them sufficient attention. And I've talked about that in this video up here, so definitely give that a watch if you haven't already. And understand that if you're anxiously attached with this fear and need to be with somebody, then you need to know this and protect your heart. So finally, what did I score based on the Game of Thrones attachment style quiz? I scored secure. So this is what it said for me. Yeah. People in Game of Thrones who are also securely attached: Ned Stark, Catelyn Stark. So let me know what you scored if you take this quiz, and definitely check out Shan Boody's video. She's definitely life goals for me. She does so great with psychology and relationships, and I'm just so excited to grow my channel to hopefully be to the point that hers is. And you can help me out with that by liking and subscribing and turn on bell notifications as well. And I will see you next week for another video. Bye.